Justin Jackson, welcome back to Open Threads. What's up, man?
I'm doing well, Brian. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. We were just saying offline, I think on this show, I I love just like hopping on the mics with like any founder friends just to talk about whatever. But I think we're gonna get into a phase where we're just gonna start to like cycle back around to a lot of the same people. And what's a big reason I started this show was because when people think about Justin Jackson these days in
Yeah,
2022, they're probably thinking like Transistor FM. They're thinking like
yeah,
podcasting in
yeah,
general. And of course, we could do a whole episode about that and SaaS and
yeah,
marketing and stuff like that. Stuff is like word association with Justin Jackson. But
yeah.
a big reason I started this show is because, as we all know, there's so much more to what we're all into. Like, I know that you're a snowboarder. I know it, in a
Mm-hmm.
previous life, you ran a snowboard shop. Um,
Yeah.
I know you're a music
We're
head just like I am. So we're going to get into this stuff.
yeah, yeah. I think it's so cool. The I think what attracted me to podcasting was getting the human story behind these people I knew on the internet anyway. And to me that's always been the most interesting and actually has been sometimes frustrating when I've done shows like Product People and Build Your SaaS, because what most people want or say they want is like tactics and like the story of how they built their business and all that.
Yep.
But all that other stuff is so interesting to me, what people are, into on the side. And
Totally.
um,
And I think that we are incredibly lucky to be in this industry. Um,
yeah,
like specifically, like we have such a unique opportunity here. I don't think people quite realize this, but I start to think about it a lot lately. Where, all right, like you're in Canada, you're on the other side of the continent from me, and I have plenty of
yeah,
friends in completely other continents and countries and parts of the U.S., completely different cultures, different upbringings,
yeah,
different interests and hobbies, different families. And the only thing that we happen to share is that we make software for a living. But other than that, like
yeah,
everything is like completely different, you know? Um,
yeah. Well, and it's interesting, you know, like just when it comes to snowboarding,
well, we have that in
that was
common
a
too,
big.
I guess.
So, sorry, what?
Well, we have that in common too. So.
Oh yeah, we have that in common. But I think what's interesting is, there's a time in my life where that was kind of one of the main things that defined my life. In high school, I started snowboarding, I think when I was in grade 9, so
Hmm.
14 or something. Had skied before, and
And where
then
you live,
I
you're like close to some mountains.
so I grew up in Stony Plain, which is about 4 hours from the Rockies. So when we had a local hill that was just like a pile of garbage that had been turned into a ski hill. And then we had another one that was like in a river ravine, so really small. But
Hmm.
then we would do big trips to Jasper or Banff, and so those were about 4 to 5 hours away.
Okay.
And then in high school, we would get these passes that would allow us to. We wake up early, like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then drive to Jasper and snowboard all day, and then come home.
Hmm.
So the weekend trips started to be a thing, and then British Columbia was right next door. So once or twice a year, we would do these bigger trips with friends and go to Silver Star and Big White and uh, all the mountains I live around now. So
So yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I,
that.
I want to get into the snowboard shop in a minute, but like, so where you live now, are you? Is it like
Oh,
how
dude, we
close are you
moved
to
here.
like some?
Yeah, we moved here for snowboarding.
Yeah.
Well, at least I did. We moved here 10 years ago, and my kids were a lot younger, and I was just
I
like,
mean,
that was
you're
my
like what,
dream.
like a within like a 20-minute drive of Great Hills.
25 minutes from my house to the chairlift at Silver Star.
Amazing, man.
Yeah,
I'm so jealous of
yeah,
you guys. Like there, I have a bunch of friends who founder friends that we go snowboarding every year.
yeah,
And most of them are like you. They live near ski and snowboard areas. And I'm in Connecticut. Within an hour, there's like some pretty terrible hills, but I got to go up to Vermont to get some decent stuff, like 3-4 hours from where I live. And it's just, it's not close enough to be like, I can go whenever I want. It's, I can't do like a half a day of work and a half a day on the hill. It's got to be a whole weekend or whatever it is,
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty fun. I mean, you end up every year since we moved here, I've gotten a season's pass, and you just end up doing a lot of like 2-hour days where you'll like drive up, go riding for a couple hours in the morning, and then be back around lunchtime, and then,
that's the other thing that
or whatever.
I don't know how it is by you. Maybe getting the season pass makes it a little bit not as terrible, but the price of being into snowboarding or skiing these days is just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. And like it's been insane for a number of years now, but then once you have kids, I mean, I've got a 6 and an 8-year-old who have been taking lessons for the last like 3 seasons. So you've got like rentals and then lessons for them, and then 4 lift tickets. I mean, we go to a crappy hill in the Northeast for 1 day, plus a hotel room, plus driving there. I mean, that's like $1,000 weekend at least.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's pricey. Yeah, it's. I mean, and it's always been expensive, but it's gotten like the multiples of expense have gone up. It's just everywhere is more expensive. I think a family pass is at our hill is it probably costs $3,000 or $4,000 a year, I think. Mm-hmm. And I've just gotten a family pass every single year, even as my kids have gotten older and not been as into it. Yeah. When we moved here, my dream was like they're all going to be pro skiers and snowboarders, that they're going to love it so much. And, they all learn to ski, and, they like it enough to do it a couple times a year or whatever. But especially my older two, they're like, they're definitely not as into it as me. But, that's cool too. It's still, one thing that's interesting to me is there's not a lot that's the same from when I was in high school with me. But 2 things that have kind of remained constant are snowboarding and music. And I mean, I like different types of music, and my snowboarding has changed, but those are the 2 things I've always been into that stayed the same. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so fun to be able to enjoy something for so long and have it evolve as I've gotten older.
It's really it is a great thing to be into as like a fun sport hobby. And like for me, probably you and everyone else who does it, is I love that it's so seasonal. Like mm-hmm. I'm already like, so like, I can't wait for the snow to get here and get into another season. But the thing that I love about it now as an adult and a business owner is it's one of the few things that really takes me out of it makes me present. Like being on, going down the mountain on a snowboard, like you have to be present, like otherwise you can like, hit a tree or something, right? So like that's one of the things that like for me is like a forcing function to like it's relaxing. It's active, but it relaxes my mind because when I'm going, like I'm not thinking about what do we need to ship this quarter? What does our MRR graph look like? What are competitors doing? I'm not thinking about any of that shit. I'm just thinking about like having fun today,
Yeah. And I dig it that you can go by yourself or with friends. Like mm-hmm. Those are very different experiences, but, or with your kids, that's a totally different experience too.
Yeah.
But going up by myself, there's just something about that of being kind of out there, and you get off the chairlift and you head off, down through the trees or whatever. And then you can just sit down there and it's completely quiet. And
yeah, it's really an amazing
feeling,
thing
oh,
out there.
it's kind of unlike anything else. I've never been into surfing. I've skateboarded a little bit, but the quiet of the mountains and just how big they are, and and also if you're riding good snow, there's also this feeling of just floating that is and being in a flow state that's just unlike anything else. It's just so amazing.
So and I grew up skiing, and then I switched to snowboarding when I was like a teenager. And then I stayed on the board for my whole adult life, and then like 2 seasons ago I tried skiing once, and I picked it up. Like, it's kind of like riding a bike, but like I was like, it's just not as fun. Like the movement is not as fun as on a snowboard. So, you know. Yeah,
I want to try skiing again, because I was the same. I skied when I was a kid, and have just snowboarded. And snowboarding is not as popular as it was. Like the shaped skis that came along really helped the ski industry. And so my kids all ski. My daughter snowboards. Although the boys this year are saying they want to learn snowboarding, so we'll see. It's a hard switch when
and it's hard to learn for a beginner. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I usually still recommend people for their kids to. I think it's easier for kids to learn skiing first.
That's my daughter has been. They both are learning skiing, and my older one is starting to ask, like, when can I learn snowboarding? I'm like, let's just get you solid on the skis first, you know?
Yeah. And there's like this, you have to learn how to get on and off lifts, and if there's rope toes or T-bars, those are just so hard to navigate if you're a beginner on a snowboard, but on skis it just makes more sense. But I would like my kids to try it out. I think in my mind it's just been like, oh man, it's like another thing for them to learn now. Like they have to start basically right at the beginning, although they know how to get on and off a lift and all that. I think that does help.
So let's talk about the.
For me, it's so great.
Totally. Let's talk about the business of the snowboarding industry.
Yeah.
All right. So I've heard you mention sort of in passing a number of times that you used to run a snowboard shop. Like, give us the quick history. Like, was that like literally your first business? Did you have any jobs before that? Like, how did you even get into that?
So in college, I did 2 years of business, and then I knew this guy in my town, Randy Jesperson, had a snowboard company called Olive, and he's probably 4 or 5 years older than me, but he was like, him and his brother Corey were like hometown heroes. They were snowboarding, they were in the first wave of snowboarding, and were competing with like Jeremy Jones and pros. Like, they've got, contest rosters where they were there and, sometimes beat like really well-paid pros. And he, like many of those early guys, he ended up getting knee injuries and having to have surgery on both his knees. And so he went into the manufacturing side. And so he had this company, Olive Snowboards and Skateboards. And I asked if I could do my practicum, my internship for college there. So after
you went to school for like a business degree?
Yeah. I have my first my business diploma, and then after that I worked with him. And
so you're one of like the rare founders in our industry that actually went to school for business. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And I always kind of joke that it wasn't that helpful, but there were parts of it that were helpful. And I think getting an excuse to talk to Randy and get him to hire me was, it's an experience I'll never forget. And so, I did my internship with him. And then after I graduated, I continued on with him for another year, I think.
So they're a manufacturer of boards, or is it like a retail shop?
Yeah, manufacturing. Yeah. Okay. So that was like my kind of my introduction to the industry. They're still around, oliveskateboards.com. And by this point, his whole story was so interesting because, you know, he was like a really good snowboarder and then had these injuries and had to pivot. And then he started making these snowboards. And because he was a snowboarder, he was also just kind of engineering minded. He knew how he wanted to build these and shape them. And so he was doing all of this by himself. And then it got popular in Japan. So he started building all these boards for Japan and was doing great. But then there were so many orders that he had to hire somebody, and they really messed up on an order, and it almost bankrupted him as a company. And so I was the first person he'd hired since then. And he's kind of like, he's just a really unique guy. Like, he's kind of grumpy and just doesn't like working with people. And so I had to really prove myself. I wanted to work in the office. Like, I wanted to do business stuff like sales and marketing and, you know, all that stuff. But he was like, no, you got to start working in the shop. And I'm terrible.
And what year is this?
This is probably 2019, I'm guessing. 2019. Yeah. Yeah.
Like 3 years ago?
Oh, sorry. 2009. No. Sorry. No. Even earlier than that. No, this is 1999 or 2000. Yeah. I graduated college in 2000. Yeah.
Justin quits Transistor to start a snowboard company.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm 19 or 20 at the time, and he gets me working in the shop. And at this point, we're mostly building. So I mean,
skateboards. 99. I mean, snowboarding is already pretty big at that point. Like, it's
Burton
is a big deal by that point, and like all that.
Yeah, snowboarding was at that point. You know, the first wave had already happened for sure, and that was probably actually peak snowboarding. I think my generation was peak snowboarding, like 95 to 2005. Yeah, is probably the best the industry's ever been.
We're probably around the same age, and I picked it up in like high school and into college. And, yeah, I
mean, it's hard to explain to people now, but snowboarding was a cultural phenomenon. Like, every kid had a snowboarding poster on their wall, whether they snowboarded or not. It was like every kid was buying Snowboarder magazine, whether they were a snowboarder or not. It was like everybody wanted to do it. It's one of the music was like this too. You know, these big kind of trends would sweep through my schools growing up, and I don't think it's like that anymore.
It's funny. I wonder how people view it, because like I know exactly what you mean. When you and me are in high school, middle school and high school, probably, snowboarding is the cool, edgy new thing, and it goes like hand in hand with like loud music and just being a teenager, and it's a thing for the young kids to do. So when you're on the mountain, it's only the youngest kids are on the boards, the older people are on skis, right?
Yeah.
And so now today, I mean, we're like the older people on the mountain now, but like,
yes,
but like, you know, it, in a lot of the mountains, it's like half and half roughly. And like you said, like skiing has made a resurgence, I think, but I wonder about like new people getting into skiing and snowboarding today. Does snowboarding still have that young edge thing to it? Like, if you're if you're totally new to mountain sports and you're just thinking like, well, should I be a snowboarder or a skier? Back in the day, it would have been like, well, am I cool enough to be a snowboarder? But now it's like, now it's like, well, anyone can do either one. You know?
Yeah, it's much more, and it's lost its cultural significance. Like, it just, snowboarding and skateboarding, and punk rock and grunge, like, they all informed the culture in a way that has just never been repeated. It was a dominant cultural force. Like, people were like, you would turn on MTV and there would be snowboarding. You would, go to a friend's house and watch a snowboard video. you would, and especially in Canada, it was like every ski hill, every ski resort, that it was just packed with kids who were snowboarding. And so on the weekends, that's what we did. We drove, 45 minutes to Rabbit Hill, which is this shitty little hill in a river valley, but we would just hang out in the park all day and ride jumps and whatever. Or we were out at our friend's house in the country making jumps and pulling each other behind a skidoo or something. So it was just such a dominant force. And like my kids, because my kids are all in high school except for my daughter, she's in college now. So they're older, and there's no like dominant cultural force like that anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like, for me and my friends, it was like everybody decided to snowboard. And then it was like maybe my grade 12 year, a lot of my friends started skateboarding, and I was a little bit late to it. But it was still like, a big movement in the culture. Yeah. We were all kind of doing things together. Everybody was going to punk rock shows together. It was like my whole graduating class. I mean, there was kids who listened to country music and stuff, but we had a big group that were like the snowboarders, the punk rock kids, the skateboarders. Like that was a defined group.
I want to get into like the music side and maybe in the next conversation here, but it's true. Like that too played a huge role in the movement. And we'll get into it in a minute, but I don't see the same sort of thing happening in music today.
No.
But what I'm curious about is like how you went from, okay, you're learning the ropes in the industry, working at Olive Snowboards, to how do you have your own shop? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I got introduced to the industry. I got taken to a lot of events and trade shows. We were like going to Slam City Jam in Vancouver and meeting all these skateboard pros, but a lot of these skateboard pros are also snowboard pros. Olive started making snowboards again, and I was just kind of in it. And once I graduated, I was at the end of my business degree now. So I did my 2-year diploma, went back to get my full degree, bachelor's degree in business. And I had just always dreamed of owning my own shop. And honestly, in terms of business in my town, like I didn't know anybody who was an entrepreneur bigger than Main Street. Like Main Street, having a shop on Main Street was kind of, those were the only entrepreneurs I knew. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to start a business, I just kind of looking around me, what's available, what is possible. It was like, well, I got to start a Main Street business. And, I'd met all of these other shop owners through Olive. And so I had a handle on how it all worked. And I'd been on the supply side. So I knew, how pre-orders worked and how, you'd get exclusives with different brands at the time, and, how you would apply for distributors and all that stuff. And so I thought, well, this would be a fun time to do it. And I teamed up with, initially it was like I was working a full-time job. And so we hired my brother to manage it, my younger brother, and I'm probably 21 at the time. And then my friend Adrian was a skateboarder, and I had started my first business ever really was in grade 12 with him. We'd put on a rave together and actually done really well. And so
another cultural force of the 90s.
Yeah, another cultural force of the 90s. And so it just seemed like, oh, this would be great. Adrian and I, he's a skateboarder, I'm a snowboarder. I'd worked in the industry, and it just felt like this is going to be a great combination.
And the idea, like location-wise, you want to do it in your hometown where you were.
And we wanted to do it in our hometown, which is probably a mistake because
and this was the area that's like not that close to big mountains.
Yeah, we're like yes, Stony Plain and Spruce Grove are these bedroom communities to
But that
Edmonton.
could still work too. I mean, like even growing, like I grew up in Long Island, New York, and then even up here in Connecticut. Like there's plenty of snowboard and ski shops in the suburbs for these families who buy stuff and go take road trips, right?
I think the problem was that Edmonton was still close enough. It was 30 minutes away. It's a city of 1.2 million people at the time, probably. And I mean, I've written quite a bit about The Real Deal. The shop was called The Real Deal. I've written about quite a bit about, the mistakes we made. And I think one is just ignoring people's natural momentum. So if you're a teenager in Stony Plain or Spruce Grove, on the weekends, if you're going to go shopping, you want to go to the big city. You want to go to Edmonton because it's exciting, right? You can hit a bunch of stores. You can go out to eat. You can cruise White Avenue and, all the cool strips in Edmonton. And we just ignored that natural momentum and thought that people would care about ideology like shop local, but people actually don't give a shit about that stuff. You know what I mean? Yep. But it was fun. I mean, so we started in 2001, I think, and I think it closed in 2005. Just
business wise, like how are you even able to? So it was like a brick and mortar store, right? Like you rented a space.
We had 2 locations, which was another mistake.
and it's retail, right? So you got to like buy a bunch of inventory. Like, what did you do? Like get a loan, or how did that work?
Yeah, it was tough. It was like, cause we were young. And so, our initial location, we, got the location. Retail is like, especially when you think about starting a, internet business. Like I started Transistor with John. I think we each put in $5,000 and like retail, you have to pay. It is so much startup logistics. Like you're getting a lease on a place where you're usually charged per square foot, and it's triple net, which means you pay a square footage fee, but then you also pay your gas, your electricity, your phone, all that stuff, and you're responsible for hooking all that up. So we got a location, and then you have to call up the gas company and get them to give you service. But they're like, oh, well, we can be there in 6 weeks or whatever. And then you got to call the phone company and they got to come in. And meanwhile, you're calling.
And you're like designing a shop. This is like a retail shop.
Yeah, and you're buying
that has to look awesome. It's a snowboard shop, right? Like
you're buying fixtures, which are not cheap. Shelves and display cases, and it is.
I don't know how. And it's crazy just to think like how many. Sounds so dumb, but like just stores and restaurants and retail shops there are in the world. It's like. And yeah, like my uncle ran a clothing store. My grandfather ran a supermarket. Like, it just seems like the most insane business. No matter what industry you're in, it's like business on hard mode,
Yeah, I often say it's like the logistics and sophistication of being like a small business owner running a retail shop are way harder, way more sophisticated, way more logistics than a software company. Mm-hmm. And your margins are way lower, and what you're risking is actually way more. So you're risking all these startup costs. It's not, we did it as cheap as we could, but it was, I know people that spend $100,000 just getting their space set up, right? Yeah.
And I mean, like, say what you want about like validation or market research or whatever, but it is such an upfront investment, no matter which way you slice it. Like you got to be pretty damn confident that you can sell a bunch of snowboards to.
I think we could have MVP'd it a bit. Like we could have sold skateboards out of the back of a truck at the skateboard park, or there's other things we could have tried first. But at the end of the day, you got to commit, and the commitment and risk is just massive. And then once you get all that done, so let's say you put, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars just getting the store set up, and you're signing a lease, which which puts you
Yeah.
on the hook legally for, you know, thousands of dollars per month that you've got to legally pay, even if it doesn't work out. And then, you know, at this time I'm 21, and I realized quickly that well, first of all, you can't order anything, like there's no in-stock ordering. You have to pre-book everything. So 6 months before delivery, you are going through tons and tons of order forms for all sorts of different manufacturers. You know, so you got your Burton order form and all these things. And you're basically trying to allocate budget, betting your money, your cash, that whatever you order today is what a 14-year-old is going to think is cool in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's an insane bet. It's just such a...
And then you have,
in retrospect,
I mean, it must have been like the seasonal thing, right? Like not only seasonal for sales, but like you're saying, like pre-orders, right? Like you're ordering for, so like snowboard shops today are ordering for winter, like 24 right now, right? Like,
yeah, you're ordering way ahead of time. And I mean, just think of all the things that can happen in 6 months. Like these days, COVID hits, there's a recession, whatever, you know, like COVID hits. And if someone booked a bunch of snowboards, but all the resorts are closed because of COVID, you're just, there's nothing you can do. And, you know, and you start off with all of these manufacturers and distributors, you start off with no payment terms. It's just, you know, you got to pay on delivery, basically. And then eventually you convince them to give you 15 days and then 30 days and then 60 days and then 90 days. But all of this stuff has an expiry date, meaning you also have to get really good at knowing when to get rid of stuff quick. And even to the point where I don't think people realize how many retailers are often selling things for cost or under cost just because having something sitting on your shelf too long is just death. If you have inventory that's just sitting there, and you miss the window of opportunity to sell that thing, you've got to get rid of it quick because the next season's coming and you've got a bunch of deliveries that you booked 6 months ago that are going to show up at your shop, and that's
literally like cash you've already spent is sitting there on your shelf. So you have to like get at least some of it back, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, things like if you had a record shop, it's a little bit easier because, you know, that Iron Maiden record is going to be the same today as it will in 6 months. But snowboarding was so fashionable, and skateboarding was so fashionable.
And plus, and like the snowboards are every year they come out with like there's a 99, and then there's a 2000.
That's right.
Even of the same board. Like if you want to buy the Burton Custom, like kids are not going to want to get last year's model unless they want a deal on it, right? Like,
well, especially back then. Like now, I think it's gotten a little more chill, but back then it was so stylish to snowboard that, you know, if you bought a new snowboard in 99, you better hope it's a 99, right? Because you're going to be showing up at the hill kind of, you know, rocking that gear. You don't want to be, you know, buy a new board, but it's technically last year's board. And the other thing is that I think a lot of people don't realize is that the hard goods in that business, which is snowboards and skateboards and bindings and boots and all that stuff, the actual core part of the sport, you actually don't make that much money on that. What you make money on is the clothes, the outerwear, the snowboard jackets, t-shirts, jeans, skateboard shoes, hats, accessories. That's where you would make full markup. So if the sweet spot for a skateboard shop or a snowboard shop would be, you know, you buy a t-shirt for 15 and you sell it for 30. And even then, like there's other costs, like you were paying delivery fees on that. You were paying, you know, costs to even put a pricing sticker on it, to have a hanger to hang it on, to have a shelf to hang it on. But your dream was to be able to buy something for 15 and sell it for 30. And then skateboards and snowboards, you know, could be like a 30% markup. So, you might
Did
buy
you have
a board.
anything going in the summer? Like, so you were doing skateboarding stuff too?
Yeah. So it was snowboarding in the winter, skateboarding in the summer, and then clothing at the time. We hit kind of the end of skateboard and snowboard fashion being popular in the wider culture. So when I was in high school, like almost every kid was wearing Etnies or Americas or Lakai or, skateboard shoes. And that was a massive market for a long time. DC shoes was like, that was, incredibly popular. And we were at the tail end of that. And also at the same time, previously skateboarding was all about exclusives. So you'd get an exclusive for Volcom and you were the only shop that could sell Volcom in your area, which was great for retailers because if you were a kid and you were just super into that brand, you would go to wherever had that brand. But then kind of right when we were starting our shop, the trend was Volcom was opening up their own outlet store in some strip mall somewhere and selling things direct to consumers. Internet ordering was just kind of coming online as a thing in 99 and 2000. So the competitive
I was actually just
pressure.
going to ask about that to sort of like wrap up this section. Like, so it sounds like your snowboard shop was like at the sort of the beginning of online retail. Like, were you guys actually, did you have a website? Did you sell anything online?
Oh, yeah.
Or was it all?
Yeah. And I was always a nerd. So, I've been.
But I mean, like, even if you had it, like, are people comfortable yet with like ordering snowboard stuff online at that time?
Not as much. I mean, you just needed more infrastructure. Like we couldn't do it. We paid quite a bit of money for credit card processing. But to get it online was way harder. It was just so difficult. So the only people that could really do it were the big manufacturing companies and the biggest snowboard shops in Canada and the US. They were able to offer
consumers, like just in the year
consumers,
2000, like people are online, but they're not really buying stuff.
Yeah,
online.
I remember when I started to feel it, it was like kids would come in and say, I just bought 10 blanks, so like blank skateboards, which were always kind of cheaper. I just bought 10 blanks on eBay. And that was when I was like, oh my God, like this is really going to start hurting retailers because kids were, they had a PayPal account and they could go on eBay and they could get these boards that were made in China and, they would order them in bulk and then they would have 10 skateboard decks for their whole summer.
Now every kid's bedroom is the local skateboard shop.
Yeah. So it was a super interesting experience. Like I said, it ended up being quite painful because we lost quite a bit of money on the shop when it closed. But in terms of the experience and everything we learned, and even like the one thing you miss with software is like we had a skateboard and a snowboard team. We were organizing these big snowboard trips where we'd rent a coach and kids would sign up and then we would take them all to a big resort in British Columbia. And that whole experience is not something that you get in.
Man, I think that there's, I do think that like marketing in general in our world today in SaaS has become like stale. Like it's not exciting anymore. And it's not like, no, there are very, very few SaaS companies that are doing anything that's like, oh wow, that's different and cool, Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I don't just mean like ad campaigns. I mean like you're talking about like snowboard companies, like they sponsor snowboard athletes, Yeah. I mean, I was even just thinking the other day, like Apple every year does their big, show to show off the new iPhone and the new watch and iPads and stuff. And like everyone in the world, like every media outlet like covers it because it's like, it's news and it's cool and it's a cultural thing. And it was more so 10 years ago when the iPhone first came out. But it's still a pretty big deal today. Like, and I was just thinking like, I was just thinking about this recently, right? Like, cause they just announced the iPhone 14 and I'm just thinking like, man, if there was like some version of this that a bootstrapped software company can, I don't know, like hold some kind of event or have like an async video thing that's just like, it doesn't have to be deceptive. It could just be like, look, we're building this really awesome product. Look at it.
Yeah.
Like, look what we're building. We think this is important. Like,
yeah.
What can, what can like make that happen, right? Or
yeah. I mean, I think the other thing we used to do is every time there was a new snowboard video that would come out, and snowboard and skateboard videos were like big business because we sold a lot of those DVDs and VHS tapes. Now that part of the industry has just collapsed because everyone just puts it on YouTube for free.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like a full like snowboard video was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And when we had our shop, the forum team was like they were the biggest deal, the biggest team. Everybody, was following their work, and they came out with this video called Video Gangs that was just a massive deal. And we did a premiere for it at the local theater. And then to start, we premiered our team video. So there's like the ability to like fill a theater with people that are just really excited about snowboarding, and then to have these fun events and throw out t-shirts. And I mean, I guess conferences kind of have that feel now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a few things that get close to it. Like you see companies putting on conferences. I think community is an interesting one. And we see like companies becoming media brands too, like creating media content.
Yeah.
Which gets to be kind of interesting sometimes. We're about to take a pretty big bet with a community thing with Zip Message for coaches, which I think will be different, and it'll like live on its own domain and everything. But like stuff like that's like it's hard to come up with stuff that's like creative. But then you do look at like the snowboard industry, or some of these other, hard good industries, and it's like it's a really different world over there.
Totally. I mean, it's one reason.
And like there's more interesting things you can do from a marketing and branding perspective.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot you can learn, and especially the guerrilla marketing kind of mindset, like skateboarding and snowboarding, and mixed in there was some other cultures like the punk rock culture and the graffiti culture, but they invented guerrilla marketing. Like Shepard Fairey was a skateboarder and a graffiti artist that came up with Obey, and it was just like something he was stenciling all over the place. And people were like, what is this Andre the Giant sticker that I see everywhere and stencil I see everywhere? And eventually that became a brand because people would see it everywhere, like every city, every subway. It just spread. And I mean, with Transistor, I've always done stickers, and I've always done t-shirts, and whenever I can, I source new artwork that I think is fun and cool, and we just do print on demand through Printful. I think more software companies should do that. You can have a full like swag shop, and just I just give stuff away.
I did some t-shirt runs with not runs, like on demand with Printful.
Yeah.
Zip Message. But I haven't really like executed like a thing where we have like a distribution of those. Like
we have a little online store that I send to people, and I just tell them to like just pick what they want and then let me know, what that's going to be. But I mean there's huge, and I wrote about this. A lot of my lessons from the snowboard industry I wrote about in this little book called Jolt. And swag is one of the chapters. And in every job I've had, giving away t-shirts and hats and stickers has paid back dividends multiple times, because you get someone like Arvid who's wearing a Transistor hat, and he'll post photos of it all the time. And people will be like, hey, that's a Transistor hat. We get so many mentions and people just talking about us because we're sending people t-shirts and hats and stickers. And that was something I learned from the snowboard industry. That was just what every snowboard company and every snowboard shop did, is we all had our own, for our shop, we had our own t-shirts, we had our own hoodies, we had our own hats, we had our own stickers. and we had our own skateboards.
You gotta like represent, and you have like this audience that like they start to self-identify with like if I'm gonna put on a t-shirt or wear a hat of something, like there's got to be something deeper than just I buy from this company. It's like I like that like this company speaks to me as a person, so I'm gonna go wear it, you know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it also taught me you have to do it tastefully, and you have to do it in a way that, you know, you want to make t-shirts that people actually wear. But yeah, so I learned all that through snowboarding. It's I think there's lots of I wouldn't replace that experience for the world, even though at the time closing the shop was painful.
Yeah, I can imagine.